stream is going up now.
Excellent. My channel. Oh dear.
What?
Oh, it's because I'm on the eRadio account. Excuse me.
Why do I not see? Is it on the videos page?
It takes a couple of seconds, doesn't it? So.
I think I was in the wrong channel. Live now. Well, that's a
There we
good
go.
thing. Oh, don't we look happy?
Oh, whoa! Why am I? Was Steve still on there, or?
No, something has happened. Hold on. I'm working on it.
Okay. Hello, chat room. Thank you for sticking around and your patience. We are
Oh, I know
all
what happened. Steve.
very, yeah, it's because Steve left. That's why I said, do you want to crop it after Steve left?
No, the problem isn't that. Let me go to. Oh, scheisse.
So Esteban says we need to say Puglius, Puglius, Puglius for luck. That's an Argentinian thing, apparently. Um, Matt, I think you just need to turn your volume up a little bit, but not your gain, because I'm getting a lot of fuzz. Do you need me to move to the left? Shall I move this way or this way? Is that better?
If you keep on moving that way, it's better, but it's problematic with Steve out of the picture because
Could,
using a whole monitor. Hang on, let me work on it.
whatever you need me to do.
Just give me a minute. Just give me a minute. The problem I'm going to have is my notes because they were sitting up there next to you, and now they're going to be in the shot. That's that's the issue for me. I have no way to look at the notes now because my whole monitor is devoted to
Look,
the
you're fine.
gloriousness of Chris Stevens. Whoops, that's too far.
That's a bit. Yeah, I was going to say, can we like zoom me out a little bit?
That's about the best I
Mind
can
you,
do.
I am watching this back on a like a 30-second delay, aren't I? So,
No, that's about the best I can do there. Let me go to the other shot and fix that too.
um, but anyway, yeah, thanks for sticking around, guys, because we are in a very foul mood with Microsoft at the moment, who have got an awful lot of explaining to do about this new version of Skype, which frankly is just an absolute joke. And I am trying so hard to censor my words and keep this safe for work, but it's really difficult because this is utter, utter trash. And I cannot wait for the day we find our replacement for Skype at last. Matthias, why are we not your like at least in the top five? 15th favorite YouTube channel.
Well, he might not be talking about Formula E radio YouTube channels because after all, that's the one we want to dominate.
Man, if we are the 15th best Formula E focused YouTube channel, then we are doing something seriously wrong, aren't we? I don't even think there are 50. Christopher Fonseca in with an early contender of comment of the week. I'm going to keep a run of these.
Yeah, all right.
Hey,
Let me
oh,
see how far I can go here.
yes, it does make me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the one good thing that has come about this scope update is I can blur my background, and it looks pretty good. Also, if I hold my, does that blur my finger? Does it look like I'm giving?
It blurs all sorts of things. It does many a thing.
Matt, if you can you look at like the notes on your phone or something, or
Nope. See, the thing is, where my camera is, I need the notes up next to the Skype window to look like I'm looking at you when I talk from the notes. And I can no longer do that because without somebody else on the call, you automatically take up the whole screen. I can't constrain how large you are on this screen at all. I have zero control over it. I can try fit and crop video. that just makes you even bigger, which doesn't help. So it expands it, and I have no local control. What is this? Share screen. I have no local control over the size of the image on my display. So it is what it is. The reason Spanners gets away with it is because he has multiple people on. So the individual images he's cropping in aren't as big. But there's nothing I can do about it. It's just, well, you know. It's not really got me off to a good start, I will be honest with you.
It also blurs your immaculately organized bookshelf. Why tidy it at all? I gutted my office last week. So if anyone who follows me on Twitter noticed that I was tweeting about a bunch of stuff that I found under my bed, that's why. Including my old racing gloves, which I've never... I haven't used for years.
All right. So there we are with Audacity. I can see that at least. Now, you said you could hear hum as well?
It's more just a kind of background fuzz, but it's better now, so it's fine.
All right. Well, we might
Worst comes, I'll get rid of that in the edit. Right now, that is the least of my worries.
Okay. So I'm going to have to go here. All right, my hotkeys still work, so let's put the car up. Now, the tricky bit for me, and we learned this on our last show, tricky bit for me is going to be, remember, revealing your lovely face once we've done the intro. Yeah. That's where it always seems to go quite wrong, and I apologize because I'm definitely not going to be on my A game at this point.
Can you see the notes, or?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good.
But I have to sort of. Well, actually, I think it'll work out okay because I've sort of got my computer propped up high enough.
Okay.
I think it will work.
Let's do a show.
Are we ready to do a show?
So much for your patience. We will now bring you E-Radio shows, Mexico City E-Pre, race preview, and news.
All right, here we go. You are listening to E-Radio Show by Missed Apex. We are electric. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's show. I'm your host, Matt Trumpets. And today's episode is called Tequila Mockingbird. Sam Bird, that is. And joining me today is everybody's favorite E-Radio journo, Chris, Stevens. How's it going, Chris?
It's going great. You know, Matt, that intro just gets longer and longer with every episode, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, you know, I do the best I can. I was really hard pressed to come up with a good title for the show, so I hope that one was appropriately punny enough.
It was exquisite. One of your finest.
Ah, excellent. Well, before we go on to the meat of the show, as it were, let me just remind everybody we are an independent podcast hosted by MissedApexPodcast.com, bringing you race reviews, news from the paddock, and tech analysis. We live stream our race reviews, so be sure to subscribe to E-Radio Show on YouTube so you get a notification when we go live, so you can join our live chat room as well, which is a fun place to be, I have to say. So tell me, Mr. Stevens, we have a race coming up, but there has been some news.
Big Dirty News.
It is very dirty news indeed. The biggest, dirtiest news of the season so far. Felipe Nasr, former Sauber Formula One driver and the man who came second to Fernando Alonso in the recent Daytona 24-hour race, is going to replace Maxi Gunter at Dragon from this race onwards, which came as quite a shock to some people. But apparently this has been the plan all along for Dragon, or at least this is what the official word is, that Maxi knew going into this season that he was going to be sharing the seat, which seems a bit off, really, given that he left Formula 2 a race early to do Formula E, and he properly came in and committed himself, came to every race last season, or very nearly every race at least. and prepared himself thoroughly for this role in a test and development position during last season, and was really supposed to, come in and hit the ground running with the team. And all of a sudden, he's out after 3 races. It seems very, very bizarre. He does remain as the test and reserve and the sim driver, but I can't help but feel he's been rather hard done by.
Yeah, it does seem to be that way. My question to you is, do you think this was really just a punt by Gunther? Do you think that he was like, maybe it won't work out for Nasr, and if I'm in, then I'm in, and it's better than what I was up to in terms of where I see my career going? Because we do have some new teams coming in, and he will have experience, and he is obviously fast. So, or do you think he knew all along? And if so, what do you suppose the motivation was there?
I honestly couldn't tell you what the motivation is. I mean, Gunther has been lined up for this race seat, though, since the Marrakesh test last season. He was the one lined up to replace D'Ambrosio at the team. So it's not like they've kind of been eyeing up Nasr for a while, I don't think. It's not like Nasr brings any extra sponsorship to the team either, because there's a bit of a commercial block going on. I mean, Dragon aren't even using Maxi's BWT sponsorship. The very recognizable pink F2 car that he was racing last year. So I really can't understand the motive. I don't see what Nasr is bringing to the team that Maxi wasn't, save for maybe a couple extra years racing experience and a bit of a wider experience, given that he's been driving DPI in IMSA since he left Formula One. But you can't sit there and say Max was doing a poor job. Yeah, okay, he had some struggles in qualifying, but he's a rookie. You would expect him to do that. And in Santiago, he really was performing really, really well. So just when he's sort of starting to climb the confidence mounting that most Formula E drivers have to go through when they join the series, he's been knocked off it by Dragon. And I don't understand it. I mean, this has been kind of brewing since the Marrakesh rookie. Nasr was supposed to be in the car during the rookie test, but contractual issues prevented that. Gunter's going to have to be back in the car anyway in Rome, because Nasr has to race at the Long Beach IMSA race that same weekend. So Maxi will be back, but he's basically just a reserve driver now. I'm honestly quite confused by the whole thing. I don't understand the decision.
Right. Well, the only thing that would have made sense to me was if Nasr was bringing more sponsorship, perhaps. But I also wonder if maybe Dragon or one of its sponsors perhaps is looking for exposure to the Brazilian market, which is really the only other thing that I can think of. And beyond that, I guess if you're in Gunther's place, like I said, given the issues that we've already seen with Nasr and sponsorship and contract, maybe he's just thinking if he hangs around a little bit, it's going to wind up being his seat anyway.
I mean, but potentially, I don't think this sends out a good message to F2 drivers, though, or drivers in in the younger categories, because what I was looking forward to this season was seeing the younger, like Gunter, and what was meant to be Albon as well in the Nissan, coming in and seeing how they go against much more experienced racers, but in a very different racing series. I've always said that Formula E needs to start aiming itself at the younger market for drivers who see Formula E as an alternative to Formula One. And there are still drivers who really want to race in Formula E who are at that level. But at the moment, the two young guns who were supposed to be racing this season, albeit through very different circumstances, but now neither of them are on the grid anymore after 3 races.
Yeah, but they are very different circumstances, though. Obviously, you take your chances where you can and where you feel like you're going to be able to make the biggest name for yourself, because that's what's going to help you down the road. And the fact of the matter is, at least for Albon, being in Formula E wound up not hurting him at all in terms of his move to Formula One. And for Gunther, I think, we'll have to see. We'll have to see what happens. But it also says, I think, I hate to use the word desperate, but there's a lot of competition for these seats. And as a driver, as someone who is a fan of the series, having experienced drivers in is going to be better for the series because you're going to get better racing, one would presume. Or do you think that's not the case?
No, I think Maxi was only going to get better. I mean, the rookies tend to. There was nothing, desperately awful, was there? There wasn't even anything really that bad. Maxi was having to get used to Formula E and was doing quite a good job of it, I felt. And he's got a really tough teammate in the form of Jose Maria Lopez as well, because let's not forget, Lopez is one of the best qualifiers on the grid and one of the most accomplished racers as well. Even though he's never really had the car to, show that off a lot of the time. So it was a real, uphill struggle for him. I don't see, any real viable reason on the surface, at least, for why they've decided to make the swap, or why, even if, what they say, the plan to have Gunther in the car for only 3 races was the plan all along, which I not 100% sold on personally, but I can't make sense of it.
It might just be one of those things we're going to have to wait and see what happens. But again, from Gunther's point of view, I think he sniffed a real opportunity. Maybe he knows something about Nasr we don't. And we'll just have to leave it there and see how Felipe does. I mean, he is fast. He finished second. I mean, he should have, by all rights and accounts, won Daytona had they not kept it open just a little bit too long. On the other hand, that was a great pass for the win. So it is what it is. Hey, we have a race coming up this week. How about we talk a little bit about that?
Yes, the Mexico City E-Prix. One of the highlights on the calendar, really. Always provides quite a bonkers race, doesn't it? Just a quick reminder of what happened last time out in Santiago. Sam Bird kept his cool in the heat. And it's going to be quite a similar scenario in Mexico City, where the extreme altitude this time is going to be the issue that's going to make cooling a challenge. Therefore, the battery temperatures, once again, are going to be on the rise. So same ultimate issue, but for different reasons this time, and therefore quite a different challenge. We know that the Audi powertrain runs well in hot conditions based off the evidence we saw in Santiago. So Virgin immediately are going to be contenders again for a double win, perhaps. But surely now this is Audi's chance. All they've needed is a smooth weekend, and they so nearly got that in Santiago before this brake pressure issue in qualifying that, frankly, I still don't think most people understand. And both Audi factory drivers, have done very well here in the past. Of course, Daniel Abt got his first official win here last season. Lucas di Grassi won the previous race there, and should have won, really, the first one, were it not for the disqualifications. Audi would have won all 3 races here. So things are looking good for them, so long as they can keep it smooth.
Right. So you mentioned the drivers and doing well, and you mentioned Daniel Abt, but we know from your unbelievable reporting, unbelievably awesome reporting, maybe I should add the awesome to it, that Abt has not yet really gotten to grips or been happy with the setup of his car. Have we any word yet as to whether progress has been made since the last E-Prix, or is it still going to be something we're going to have to wait and see if Audi's managed to sort it out for him?
So this was actually one of the questions that was asked by one of the viewers for our little sort of Q&A section later in the show. And if you are watching in the live chat room, do throw your questions into the chat and I'll add them to the list. So we do have quite a fair few of them to get through. So I'll try and get to it, but I can't make any promises at this stage because the response to this week's show has actually been really, really good. But to answer your question, Matt, and indeed Korku Anoma, who posted that one in the Facebook group as well, about Daniel. Yeah, he's been really struggling, and it's been more down to setup than anything else, I think. Because the arrival of the Gen 2 car really hit a reset button on Formula E. And we saw it took him a while to get to grips with everything and start to match Lucas on a consistent basis. Now, he's a much different driver than he was, 4 years ago, obviously. Back at the tender age of 21, that's how old I am now. Or he might have been even younger than that. I think he was 20, actually, when he joined, fresh out of a disastrous GP2 campaign. He wasn't at, the best point in his career, in all honesty. So I think it'll take him less time to build that back up. But nonetheless, he's still got to do it. I think this weekend is going to be a bit of a chance for him, actually, because he's a bit lower down in the point standings than, say, some of the other potential victory contenders. Therefore, he's going to go out later in qualifying and get better track conditions, so a better qualifying position already beckons for him, provided he can get the job done. But also, because Mexico City is really the only permanent facility we go to, it provides its own challenges. The cars handle so differently compared to the other street circuits that we've been visiting, that are also unlike most FE venues, and the ones that we're going to visit later in the season. So this is a real unique point of the calendar that we're at. And I do think the altitude is going to play havoc a little bit, and his car runs well, so I think he's got a good shout. I mean, of course, they'll have been working in the simulator to try and improve his setup, but there's really nothing like getting out and onto the track and doing it for yourself.
Yeah, no, there's really not. And hopefully the engineers have been able to get on with figuring out how to make this new car, how to adapt this new car to the driving style that he prefers. But I'm going to ask you, as far as the altitude goes, it's going to be very much a cooling challenge for the batteries. But it's also potentially going to be a challenge for the tires as well, because we are bringing new tires. And the characteristics of the tires and the track will be different because the season is going to be different. Do we have a preview of what the weather is predicted to be there? Or is it going to be cool, cloudy, sunny? Any ideas?
It's usually a hot one, isn't it? We're still a good, 5 days at this point from the race, so I wouldn't really like to look at a weather forecast, because I don't trust them even a day before the race. I've spent 4 years reporting that there's a good chance of rain for a race, and then it turns out not to be true. So I tend not to bother anymore. But in terms of the tires, your favorite topic, Matt.
Indeed.
This is actually a good point, because we know that this third generation Michelin tire wears quicker than the previous ones that we've seen. So throw that into the mix, but also the dust that is on the circuit there. You know what it's like when they go out there for the Formula One. In FP1 and FP2, the track is just absolutely filthy and atrocious, and the cars are throwing up the dust in the air. That's what it's going to be like for the whole day of Formula E running. Of course, they get much less running in practice, and it all happens over one day. So the track conditions are going to be filthy, and tire wear here is usually higher than what we see at most venues. So I do think that is going to come into play a little bit. Actually, the tire wear was what contributed to Lucas di Grassi's disqualification a few years ago, because the tire shredded so much weight over the course of the race. But another contender I'm actually looking at is Nissan Edams. They ran strong in Santiago. And this is probably the best circuit on the calendar for the twin motor layout. Or at least this is where Neo showed their best pace in recent years. So remember that I said in Santiago we may see some oddball results. So maybe the same here because of the dust and the cooling issues. But this should be a good indicator still of Nissan's software progress. So of course they've been making, since testing, and it's been the weak point of the car. And what Buemi says, resulted in his incident that took him out of the lead in Santiago. But we should see this will be a very telling race for Nissan's potential for the season.
Well, since you have an encyclopedic knowledge of every finish in Formula E history, traditionally, how has our friend Sebastian done at Mexico? Has it been a track that he has enjoyed, or has it been, what is it you say over there, a bogey track?
So I think both times he was going for the championship, this was like one of his worst circuits. It has been for most of the championship contenders, because I remember this race in season 2 and season 3, Degrassi turned it around in the championship. He would have done in season 2 if he wasn't disqualified. But it hasn't been good for him. It hasn't been for Jev either, in all honesty. I say that for Jev. Last season he was 5th, and for most of the season that was his worst result until Zurich. So, as bad as interpretive, but it's not been a great track for him in the past. But that could all change this year. Like I said, reset button on Formula E, man.
Yeah, well, it seems like every race is a reset button. So let's follow up with Techeetah a little bit. They have had a lot of what could easily be termed missed opportunities over the first couple of races. Now we're coming to a track where historically they've not finished as strongly. Is this going to be the year that they look back and say, we just really let it get away from us early on? Do you see them struggling at this track?
The issue with this circuit, again, like we saw in Santiago, is that because of the dust, the track evolution is insane. And so the guys that go out later in qualifying, once again, are going to have a huge advantage. Now, I say this as a race-specific thing because drivers are constantly going to complain about being in Group 1 for qualifying, getting the worst track conditions. But as I mentioned in our Santiago review, historically, it's not actually a bad group to be in. It's just at specific circuits where you get vast amounts of track evolution. So in Santiago, it's because of the sheer heat and the fact that it was a new surface. In Mexico City, it's because of the dust. So the track is going to clear up with every car that runs over the surface. So here, I remember last season, Da Costa getting right up into Superpole, actually, because he went out in Group 3 or 4, even though that Andretti was the worst car on the grid last season. So obviously he's got a very different car now, hasn't he? But that's definitely going to play a part in it. I think these guys, the guys who are battling to not be last, Venturi, Dragon, Neo, HWA, are going to play a big part in qualifying because they're lower down in the order. They're going to be going out later in qualifying, getting the better track conditions, and like we saw in Santiago, we have potential for Superpole. And again, we could see more scenarios where the Techeetahs and the BMWs end up further down the order. I'll be interested to see how Virgin go because now they've got their guys in Group 1. If I remember rightly, they were in Group 2 last time. I could be wrong on that, but we've got a good mix of guys in different teams in the hunt for the championship in that top 6, and even the top 10 who are going to be getting pretty poor track conditions for qualifying. So again, it's going to be another mixed up grid, and the potential is still there for Techeetah and Andretti and Virgin and Audi to fall down the order and have yet another missed opportunity.
All right, so let's talk about who else you might tip to do well here. But an interesting side note on the dust, there is an active volcano, which I'm sure you know, by Mexico City. And the reason I know this, and this is just a personal side note, is my wife actually was going there on business, went to the airport, got on the plane, flew halfway there, and then the volcano was erupting and the ash cloud made it unsafe to fly into the airspace. So they actually turned the plane around and she had to come back, came home, had to go back the next day and do it all over again. I think one of the things that affects the tire wear there is going to be some of that dust is actually volcanic ash and is literally shards of glass. So it's much more abrasive than perhaps dust that you would find at other circuits. That said, who's your dark horse for this? Who do you think might unexpectedly do well? Do you think we're going to finally see Van Dorn finish up in the top 10?
It's a good shot for him, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, given the opportunity, he can throw it into Super Bowl. He's doing it in two of the first 3 races. So he can do it. And this is going to be another one of those races where I think it's potential. He's got to just make sure he gets the car home this time. In fact, HWA in general just need a competitive finish because they haven't had it yet. And they're really lacking. They're so close in Santiago with Van Dorn and before he put it in the wall. So, and that should be a bit less of an issue here because it's less like a street circuit here. There are fewer barriers to hit and a bit more runoff. You know, there's runoff at the chicane. Of course, the stadium section is all runoff. And the last chicane as well, there's also runoff there. So it's less likely that you're going to smash your car up a little bit, which I'm sure is it one of two things are going to happen with it. Either the drivers are just going to be hugely relieved that they aren't going to risk smashing their cars up, or some of them are going to get overconfident about that and do something worse than they would do normally and really smash their car up. But that's one of the challenges of Formula E now, isn't it? Only having one car for the whole day, no swapsies available.
Yeah, it has changed things a bit. I don't know if it's necessarily for the better, but you know, it is what it is. The rules have changed. Life has moved on. Do we see it being an advantage for someone like Massa to have already raced there on the full circuit? No, not really.
No, it's so different. There's one corner that's the same. The only corner that Formula One and Formula E share, which is that right-hander leading into the stadium section, the rest is totally different. I mean, maybe being somewhat familiar with the surface is some handy information to have, but really, you know, previous knowledge that you'll have had there, because I think Pascal's driven it as well, but previous knowledge is just not going to be there. Speaking of Pascal, actually, you've got to say Mahindra are going to be right up there. I mean, they have been everywhere else, so surely the podium has got to be the goal again.
Yeah, well, you'd think so, and he has looked very strong. The chat room has helped us out with the forecast, which is currently maximum sun and 30°C.
Didn't expect anything less. So it's going to be it's not only going to be hot, but it's just going to be a lack of air in general to cool those cars. And actually, with the Gen 2 cars, if I'm remembering this rightly, there's less kind of air cooling available because the bodywork is a bit more closed off around the cars now. It's actually harder to use air to cool these cars. So the challenge is just going to step up a little bit more. So I think it's going to be a similar race unfolding like it was in Santiago, where they might just have to take it easy for a little bit. And towards the end of the race, if you're starting to see these guys struggle, those lap times are going to rise pretty quickly. Like in Santiago, they were nearly 10 seconds a lap slower by the end of the race, I think.
You know, I do sort of love it because it's like when the old Formula One cars would just run out of fuel right as they got onto the final few laps, and they'd have to just coast it on home. And it is kind of the same thing. So if you are clever and can keep your temperatures down, the end of the race could provide some real drama for us.
Yeah, definitely. It could also take away as well, like we saw with Wehrlein and Bird in Santiago. But you know, if your leaders are going strong, and then suddenly they have some heat issues, the overheating, and the guy behind is running really well, then who knows? I worry that's where Techeetah are going to struggle again, because I don't think their car handled it brilliantly in Santiago. And Lotterer was one of the worst affected cars. Although that said, he was carrying an inverter issue as well. But I don't know if that was a side effect of the overheating as well. So they're going to be interesting ones to watch because they got to start getting the smoother weekends in. You know, like Audi. You know, they're way ahead of Audi in the championship, just because their car is, I think, is fundamentally faster, but they have not met the potential of that car. Because it could have won two races at this point, maybe even Santiago as well. But the qualifying was so mad from that. I'm not going to draw any conclusions from about Techeetah on that one. But they should have had a lot more points by now than they have actually got, and there's more risk of them missing out again. Darren Johnston in the chat room actually was asking about Mahindra. Are they on a lucky run, or can they properly mix it at the front? I think they can properly mix it at the front. You know, you don't get 3 podiums in a row by mistake. I think that car is just really, really strong, and obviously they've got 2 quality drivers in that car as well. So, I mean, don't get me wrong. You know, there was some fortune in Marrakesh with the BMWs taking each other out, but at the bare minimum, they'd still have had 3 podiums. At this point, they've had 2 podiums and a win. So, you know, there has been a small amount of luck in there, but bare minimum, they still would have been on the podium in every race.
Yeah, you know, I used to play soccer, which I think you call football over there for some reason that no one can figure out. And I had a coach who was Dutch, entertainingly enough, and he always used to say he prefer a lucky player to a good player any day of the week. And it strikes me that Mahindra might be good, but they are definitely have been lucky at the start of the season. If we're going to talk questions, should we go ahead and move on and answer Noel Nagy's question, which is related to Nasser Gunther? What other driver changes are you expecting this season? He's expecting Paffett's not going to stay till the end, but he's curious to get your opinion.
Yeah, the questions this week have been really, really good. I sort of scanned them before the show, and they have been really, really good, really interesting. I'm looking forward to getting into them. And if you have questions for the next preview show, then go ahead and throw them into the comment section on the YouTube video if you're watching this, or tweet us at eRadio Show. We love hearing your comments. So to Noel's question here, for Gary, I think he's fine. You know, he's been HWA Mercedes driver for years, a lot of success in DTM. At the start of the season, I was more of the 2 HWAs. I was more worried about Stoffel, because of his run of luck. You know, it would just happen to be that he gets a Formula E driver and then halfway through the season gets booted out. But he's actually a Mercedes driver himself now, and is looking ahead at a Mercedes factory drive when they take over the team next season. So out of those 2, I'm not fussed. I'm not worried about them. In general, I don't really see any mid-season changes happening, but that's not to say I don't think there are going to be a couple of drivers who we've seen are worthy of much better cars departing for better prospects at the end of the season.
All right, fair enough. You were talking about Stoffel, and I have a related question. When Mercedes comes in next year, is HWA going to become Mercedes, or is HWA going to continue to run its own secondary team, and then Mercedes will run its own factory effort, and they're going to share personnel and knowledge?
HWA will become Mercedes. It's a Mercedes, factory outfit, but run by HWA. So the staff you see in the HWA team now are the ones who are going to be operating that team as a Mercedes factory outfit next season. And then, of course, we have Porsche coming along as well. So the 12 teams that we have for next season will be including those guys.
All right. Esteban and Edward both asked about attack mode, and specifically how you think it might work in the stadium section. Do you think it's going to be more like Season 3, where it was chaotic? or do you expect everything to go more smoothly because the cars are a little bit more tame and the
So
drivers are a bit more experienced?
it's an interesting one because attack mode is right in the heart of the stadium section between turns 8 and 9, which are the first two left-handers of that stadium section. So if you're watching the race a few years ago, where Prost and Heidfeld and Rosenqvist all came to blows towards the end of the race, with the big smash up there. So right in the middle of those two left-handers, and there isn't really a straight there. It's more just a continual left. So this really does create an interesting scenario. I got to say, I don't really like the location. I'm not going to lie. I think it's worse than what we had in Adiria. In terms of an idea, anyway, obviously we haven't seen it in action, but there's sort of anticipation. I mean, I can understand why they put it there because, you know, this is a spectacle for the viewers in the stadium. But the theory is you can't really lose a place because by taking that attack mode, you're already defending the next corner. But then you're on the dust, which, you know, is going to be a way worse offline, obviously. So you may throw it away yourself, especially once you suddenly get an extra 25 kilowatts of power. Might not be anticipating it a little bit, just how much the spike is. I don't like the positioning of it. I mean, we talked about in Adiria how because they had to go slower into the corner to make attack mode, that there was the potential for people to just run into the back of one another. We didn't see that, but this is a more extreme case, I think, because the corner itself is quicker, but the opportunity you have to actually, you know, get into that attack mode area is far smaller, far shorter. So you're going to have to drop a lot of speed. So we could probably see a few incidents in there. I really don't like the location. I'm not going to lie.
All right, so you're asking about location, but immediately I think of temperature and batteries. So do you think, given the fact that regen is the main driver of battery temperature, that we're going to see a lot of people trying to get through the attack mode earlier in the race? Because later on, if your battery's overheating, it's not necessarily going to do you a lot of good because you still have to add energy back and you're using extra energy, which means that you could suddenly be looking at a potential of running out of energy before the race ends if you've left it too long because you can't regen enough to keep up with the demand.
Yeah, no one really ran it late in Santiago, did they? I think that combined with the fact that it's going to be very, very difficult to lose a place means that drivers will probably be more tempted to take it earlier, just because you can't lose a place. But then also because, you know, with the potential for regen issues and just pace issues in general towards the end of the race.
All right, Korku would like to know how altitude will affect the new cars. Now, you've spoken on that a bit in terms of what the cooling is built into the chassis, but he'd also like to know if these are the two biggest stress tests for these cars in terms of extreme weather conditions for the year.
So in terms of temperature, I think probably. That's not to say that these cars aren't still going to be pushed throughout the season, especially because towards the end, the European races can get pretty hot. Zurich was a very hot one as well. New York, as you all know well, Matt,
Yes.
very, very hot in the summer. In Berlin as well, the tires will get a good seeing too as well, I think, just because of the rough surface, you know, the concrete surface that vibrates the car so much. It's so abrasive and it takes so much out of the tire. But in terms of extreme weather conditions, this really is the toughest two races we'll see, I think. Although there are still, you know, some unknowns in there because we've got a new circuit at Bern, which looks very fast. We have a new circuit in Sanya as well. Nobody really knows what to expect there. And Hong Kong is probably going to be difficult in its own senses because that's the first proper street circuit we go to, I think. in terms of it's actually on a street with a rough, horrible city center surface. Not the park surfaces or the fresh surfaces that have been laid out for Formula E events so far this season, or the permanent facility circuit that we get in Mexico. So yeah, the altitude here is going to make things a little bit different. I think the motors actually are able to spin a little bit faster. So of course, with the less air, you get less downforce, which there isn't already a lack of that in these cars to begin with, because the aerodynamics of the car are built for, cutting through the air cleanly, not for pushing the car into the ground. So this is generally where we see some of the top speeds of the season. That might change now because Zurich last season, I believe, was where we saw the top speed, the fastest the Formula E car has gone. And I think there are other circuits with longer straights now, but certainly this is one of the longer ones on the calendar.
Well, that does bring up an interesting point. If the density of the air is lower, then you would expect to be able to go farther with more efficiency because you have less resistance from the air. On the other hand, you're looking at increased challenges both for the tires and for cooling that could potentially slow the cars more, and maybe even, well, I don't know. The Regen does a lot of the brakes, but I do worry a bit about the front brakes in a circuit like that, because they're probably, if I'm remembering correctly, there's a couple of pretty big braking events around the whole of it. Right. So let's move on and talk about everybody's favorite Kiwi, Brendan Hartley, who I had to be heartened to hear his former team principal, Franz Tost, say that it really, it's 2 or 3 years before you can show your true potential in Formula One. I'm sure he didn't feel used at all when he heard that. But we do hear rumors that he might be eyeing up Formula E as a single-seater series. Have you heard anything? What do you think of that?
So, he's an outside shot at the Porsche seat. My understanding is that Porsche want drivers with Formula E experience. So they've already signed Neil Yarni, who's got 2 races under his belt from the start of season 4 when he was at Dragon, back when that Porsche technical tie-in was on. So the likelihood is they want Andre Lotterer, but he already has a contract with Techeetah for next season, so they'd have to work that out. So I guess if that doesn't work out, then Hartley is the one that they'll take. But I think Sam Smith said on eRacing 365 that Brendan has been part of the development program, so he's been in the sim, and I think they recently started testing their car on the circuit privately. So there's that to go with it, but of course testing is very different to racing, isn't it?
Yes, it is. But if I'm understanding this correctly, what you're really saying is that we could see Brendan in for a year and then replaced by Lotterer, which, ouch. I'm just going to say it, ouch. He doesn't really deserve that. He's a good driver, and I don't know how you felt about his tenure at Toro Rosso, but I do believe he got the very short end of a rather unlucky stick.
Yeah, definitely. I remember we had a good discussion about this in the first Missed Apex season review show for 2018, where I valiantly defended Brendan for a lot of the stick he got. Very harshly, I felt. But there you go. I think he's a quality driver. Double world champion, of course, in the World Endurance Championship. So, he certainly knows how to drive, doesn't he? I think putting him in the development role is pretty good, to be fair. But was it the thing? You say that if they can't get Lotterer out of the contract, money is no issue. I think really, it's Porsche, so I don't think they'll have any trouble if they have to buy him out. Depends how much Techeetah fight it and how DS fight it, and what Andre wants, crucially. So of course, and he's going to be the ultimate factor, isn't he? Because here is a team he knows he can win with these guys. Currently, would he risk that for a Porsche effort that they've gone about very differently to the likes of BMW and Mercedes, the other German rivals, the marques that they're going to be competing against, different to Audi as well, who all gathered information about Formula E by investing themselves in a team before making their own entry. Whereas Porsche tried that with Dragon and it didn't pay off. So, there's some question mark about which seat would you rather have? Would you, rather you got a fairly good chance of a solid season with Techeetah where you can win races and maybe go for the championship, or risk it all on a Porsche new entry. So we'll see what Andre wants.
Well, it's a very interesting and intriguing question, because as part of the pair of drivers for Techeetah, they are miles ahead in the team championship. He has the chance to win the occasional podium, but at the end of the day, his teammate is the world champion. Will that ever change the dynamic? Is it principal and second? Or does he think that he could take it away from him? But if he goes to Porsche, then maybe it could all be his. So I don't know. It's very intriguing, because, and I will say this because having met them both at the race last July, they very clearly get on well with each other, and the team functions very well, very much because of that. Very much because of that, because the two drivers can and do work well together. So, wow, that is a bomb of a question, so to speak.
It's a hugely significant part of the driver market for next season, isn't it? And Techeetah aren't short on development drivers that they could use to replace Andre, should they need to. Tatiana Calderon being one. James Rossiter has been doing a lot of testing for them. Whether these people want these seats, of course, is another thing, or whether they just want to develop the cars. And then, of course, there's a plethora of drivers already racing in the series or looking for a seat. The one in. So it's going to be really interesting. It's not like a Formula One driver market where there's basically the guys you got on the current grid and maybe 2 or 3 extra people who could be breaking in. Usually the guys that are at the top of F2, for example. But with Formula E, you've got so many drivers. You've already got 22 drivers in the field. Throw in everyone who's driven a Formula E car before that, and then throw in the people at XF1, IMSA, WEC, Formula 2, and even Formula 3 guys now. From every field of racing, these guys are coming in. So there are so many options that you have. I don't know how they begin to pick one, to be honest, but definitely Andre is going to be a key part of the market this year. So one to watch as the season unfolds.
All right, so I have a question for you. We know that Formula One has been making an effort to improve its audience share, and they've been successful to a certain extent in the United States. Do you think that Formula E is missing a trick because of the IMSA drivers, of the Indy drivers? They've not recruited anyone. There's no Taylors involved. I mean, we have a couple of American car manufacturers involved, but we don't have any of the drivers that people already follow coming in to race any of these cars. And I'm just curious, do you think that is something that Formula E is seriously thinking about at this stage? And if not, should it be something they're thinking about? Because certainly Formula One isn't the same kind of weight as IndyCar, never mind NASCAR. But if you got a driver that was popular or well known in a series, you'd immediately grab a fair amount of audience share with them.
So are you talking about the specific American audience?
Yeah, I am talking about the American audience because, you know, it is a bit of a challenge. It's on different various Fox channels, and you sort of have to chase it around. But honestly, if you follow IMSA at all, it's not that much different. And if you got somebody like Jordan Taylor into a seat, or, you know, a Newgarden or somebody like that, I don't think Newgarden would give up his Indy drive necessarily. But you get my point. If you get somebody with a name like that, known to Americans, into a seat, then potentially that translates to market share.
No, that's an interesting point, actually. I agree with you on the Fox Sports thing. You know, I think they can make it easier for people to follow a little bit on the TV. But it's interesting. The IMSA thing I can understand, because it's hard enough for the World Endurance Championship to try and avoid date clashes with Formula E and IMSA, sheerly because of the number of drivers that race in it. But if you then try and make a calendar where none of those three series clash during a whole year, man, that's just going to be impossible. And we're already seeing, you know, NASA's out for one race because of Long Beach IMSA, so that's already a huge challenge. That might be part of the reason why we don't see more IMSA guys in there. You know, we do have American teams with Andretti, but it's tied up with a German manufacturer. Dragon potentially could be working with Ford in the not too distant future. Ford themselves are still evaluating an entry into Formula E, whether that's going to be on their own terms or whether they partner with another team. If that's the case, you'd have to be looking at Dragon for that, because we're basically the only ones without a manufacturer. So I think that could help. That could definitely help. But I can't honestly think of too many IndyCar drivers. You know, when you start getting a spread of drivers from all those different series, and you know they want to race in both. I mean, Felix Rosenqvist wanted to race both Formula E and IndyCar, but he couldn't because half the season clashed. At some point, it just becomes a logistical impossibility to keep it available for everyone. But you could do that and just say, right, well, you can just race whatever races that you actually want to do, and you can do. But at some point, you just have to have driver consistency. You know, it was a big issue in the first 2 seasons of Formula E, was just constant driver swaps. No one knew who was racing at what team and at what race at half the time.
All right, then. All right, then. All right, then. I'm getting an echo. Suddenly, from nowhere.
Is it showing up in the recording?
I have no idea, but we're at about 59 minutes in Audacity, if you want to write that down. All right, I think maybe I just leaned in a little bit.
Okay, cool.
Into the mic.
Last question, I think.
Yeah, well, we have sort of about the qualifying. You mentioned it earlier. The drivers have become increasingly vocal about the unfairness of their life. And it's just a thing. And I'm going to say it now from my own perspective, and I'm curious to see what you think. It's too early to know if forcing the championship leaders from the previous year into Group 1 is unfair. But if I look at a series like World Rally Championship, if you're the leader, you go off first, and it is a significant disadvantage. Is it too big of a disadvantage? I don't know. Mostly because the cars that have been disadvantaged by it have gone on to create penalties and other problems for themselves that have kept them from demonstrating their actual potential at the race. And in any event, it's going to be something that needs to be recorded across a whole season before you could even think about drawing conclusions. That said, I'm sure you've heard more from the drivers about it than I have. So what's your take on it?
Every race, I not so much since since they changed the format so that they would go out in championship order rather than the lottery system that they used to have. And I talked about this on the show. Was it the Santiago review where I said that was when they perfected this qualifying format? And I stand by that because Jev and Lotterer were the ones who made comments. There were an article on Autosport about how they didn't like the format because they went out in Group 1. And right, so of the 3 races you've had so far, you have been disadvantaged in 1. You're probably going to be disadvantaged in this one as well. I mean, big whoop, you know. But throughout most of the season, and as I keep, saying, historically, being out in Group 1 just doesn't hinder you. There are at certain events disadvantages because of the track surface, but these are the conditions you end up dealing with. And the whole idea of the format is to hand a disadvantage to those at the front. Formula One is constantly on about ideas, how you disadvantage guys at the front and get a mixed up qualifying. Do you add ballast to the cars at the front of the championship? Do you run qualifying in reverse order and do all this other stuff? No, this format is a beautiful solution to the issue. And it works. It worked wonders in Santiago and has spiced up the championship beautifully. Now, I love the fact that at most events it isn't so overpowering that it defines a race day. But occasionally it will. Like everything else in racing, at some events, a factor is going to be a bigger one than it is at other ones. It's just going to and fro. Sometimes going out in Group 1 might even be an advantage. It's just going to and fro. And that is part and parcel of this championship. I love the fact that they do it. I can maybe somewhat understand Jev's argument about the fact that, DS have spent so much money building this car. And we're not even, they're making us look like fools. And you're like, well, the idea is that if your car is so good, you can still make it to the front. And across the season, you'll still be at the front of the field anyway. It's an extra challenge, and I love it. There's just nothing wrong with this format for me. The whole idea is to disadvantage the guys at the front so that we see the Venturis and the Neos and the Dragons suddenly squabbling for a top 6 position in Santiago, which we hadn't seen them anywhere near up until that point.
Can I tell you a secret?
Go for it.
Do you remember when Formula One changed its qualifying format a few years ago?
Yeah, that worked really well, didn't it?
Yeah, now, I'll tell you a secret. I actually liked that format.
Right, this is going to be the last e-radio show that Matt and I do together.
Nope, for the exact same reason that you like the qualifying format now in Formula E. If it worked as it was envisioned, what you would have had was the last person, the person farthest away from the I'm making it to the next qualifying session, halfway through the session have exactly one chance to run a fast lap and get themselves out of danger. And down the ladder you go. So each person was on the spot for exactly one lap. If you ran a fast lap, then you shoved somebody else out. They were the next ones on. They had to extricate themselves from danger or they would get booted. But you know why it didn't work? Because the strategists couldn't get on top of it. The timings, they couldn't get on top of the timing. It was too complex. That's why it didn't work. If it worked like it was supposed to, it would have been from about halfway through qualifying each session to the end. It would have basically been solo laps to get through the next session or not. Which, like with Williams, yeah, whatever. Like that would have ever happened. But you remember those times where Red Bull was in difficulty till the very last minute? They would have had to get it together quicker or they would have been doomed to the back of the grid. And that would have been interesting. So I think I take your point about the qualifying. I like the added challenge. And yes, if you're at the front, more should be expected of you. Absolutely, because you were the best of the best of the best, sir. And yes, that's a Men in Black quote. Thank you very much. Sarah wanted to know a bit about the different heating issue source and setup and how that would impact qualifying versus the race. And dare I chuck in, do you think it's going to affect how the teams choose to use their two sets of tires this weekend?
Yeah, again, the tires is just going to be something that happens on a race by race basis, isn't it? How you use them up. So with this being one potentially where there's a bit more tire wear, could see them save a set for the race, or maybe use the new set in qualifying. We'll have to see on that, because I think some teams do have very different approaches to it. So it's going to be different. It's not even something they really talk about all that much, although I do maintain it is a factor. With the setup and the heating, the classic scenario is that the more you close up the bodywork, the faster you'll go, but the harder it is to cool your car, because obviously you've got less air going into the system. So you can open that up a little bit, or you'll drop performance. With Formula E, I think that's even harder. As I mentioned earlier, the body's already pretty closed off. But then I think opening up, because the car doesn't make much downforce anyway, opening it up isn't going to lose you too much time either. So I get, they will have tried out a few different things in the sim, but they're not going to be able to replicate that scenario. So they're going to have to really hit the ground running and work out very, very quickly what brake cooling they can get away with as well. Because now we've finally got brake ducts on these cars. How much cooling they can get away with on that, let alone the powertrain. So they'll have learned from Santiago, and they'll implement that again. But the challenge is somewhat different, just because it's not just sheer heat you've got to deal with. I mean, it's a bit cooler, but it's the lack of air that's the real issue.
Right, and along those lines, and speaking of the tires a little bit, it's going to be interesting because of the challenge of the tires overheating and cooling them properly. That could also lead to both camber and toe adjustments to put more of the tire in contact with the pavement, which would then reduce the nimbleness of the handling. Because normally you see the tires sort of tilted towards each other and pointed towards each other. What that does is that just simply puts a smaller contact patch on the pavement. That heats up rapidly, and the rest of the tire heats up more slowly. And so if you don't heat the tire up enough before you start racing, then when you start to try and use those other parts of the tires when you're in a corner and they're cold, you can go from having a whole lot of grip to very little grip suddenly. But it's going to be so hot and the tires are going to cool so poorly that you're also at risk of overheating the parts of the tire that are always in contact with the track. So it could lead to some handling changes for some of the cars depending upon the data they gather in the first practice.
This new tire as well heats up better than the old one, so it's less of an issue than what it was before. But also on this circuit, they don't get much respite. There's really only one straight, because you think about all the other flat out runs are still corners, like that long turn 2 that leads into the chicane, through the whole stadium section. Coming out of it, you're still going through curves and putting some strain on the tire. So it's going to be in constant use, and throw on top of the abrasive dust, it does just make it a factor.
All right, then, you know what? I do have one more question for you, Chris Stevens. And that is, do we have a
comment of the week?
We do. It's a clear winner on this one. I think he's banned from getting comment of the week in the Missed Apex chat because he's won it too many times. But not so on this show. Christopher Fonseca. That blurred background does make Chris look rather angelic.
Oh, come on. You just picked it because it was a compliment for you.
we're trying out a new blurred background, which is the one upside of this new Skype update, apparently, which we're still working out. But no, it's classic Fonseca, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, it kind of is, and I have to hand it to him. It is actually technically true because you do look rather cerulean in your blurred background there. So congratulations, Christopher Fonseca, this week's
Comment of the week.
And that means it's time to plug once again all of the things. Where can we find you? What are you up to, Mr. Chris Stevens?
So yeah, interesting time for me, really, because I've just landed a new job in motorsport PR, which I haven't really talked about on any of the shows yet, which is odd for me, really. So new Twitter handle, at Chris on Racing for me, if I don't think I've mentioned that on this show in particular. Interesting times ahead, absolutely. And there's a lot going on with Missed Apex at the moment, isn't there? We've got the sim event coming up at Simply Race in Milton Keynes. We've got 15 spots available for drivers to take part in the event, where we're also going to be doing the live show. The full details of that you can find on Spanner's Twitter handle, at SpannersReady on Twitter. It's going to be a great event. I think we've got another live show coming up. We're doing the full sim event, 2 heats and a final, all live streamed, commentated on by yours truly as well. So big event. So come and help make that a real memorable day.
Excellent. As for me, I'm at MattPT55 on the Twitters. You can come find me or go read my wife's books at A Weaver Writes. If you need a present for that significant other person in your life, or even if you just need something new to read, do check it out. She's got a new book coming out, The One I Love to Hate. And be sure and catch us on Twitter at eRadio Show. And if you're part of the Miss Apex Slack group, don't forget we do have a Formula E channel as well. You just have to search for it. And remember, chicks dig heels, wounds cause scars, and glory is a fungible concept under certain philosophical precepts. This has been eRadio Show. All right, and we're out. Sorry about that. I left the thing hidden, so there will be a little tiny bit at the end that you will need to trim out in your video edit.
That's fine. That's fine.
Not a bad show.
That was a good show. Bearing in mind, when we sat down at 7:30. Chat room. If you missed the start of the stream, I cannot tell you the issues we were having trying to get Skype to work because they updated it. The new version is just god awful. And we spent a good half an hour working out how we were ever going to get this live stream going, which we did not anticipate to have to do. But here we go. We got it done.
Pressure.
Thank you for stopping by.
No pressure at all.
And thank you, Darren. I'm very excited about the new job. So.
Yeah, no, it's going to be good. So what are you doing for this new company?
I am a PR associate. I shall be assisting with clients such as Porsche Motorsport Asia Pacific.
So you're going to get me a new car to drive around Brooklyn because I live in Brooklyn and they want their new cars to be seen by people who matter and count?
Oh, my God. That's
going to pretty much work, right?
Motorsport Asia Pacific that won the Bathurst 12 Hours. So
yes,
that's a nice client. And KCMG, who also came 7th in the Nissan GTR, could have been on the podium.
I'd drive a GTR if you got me one.
Anyone would drive a GTR if somebody got them one. It's hugely exciting. I'm really looking forward to the job. I think that maybe me and Formula E are taking a little break in terms of my immediate live coverage anyway. So for anyone, I doubt it, but if any of you, like follow my live tweets and my articles on Formula Spy, where I do my persistent Formula E coverage, you might see a bit of a drop in that. Just because we're going to have so many races where they clash with an event I need to help out with. Is that going to stop me coming on the show and missed Apex? God, no. Try and stop me. Try and stop me. So, yeah, it's a good time. It's a good time. I quit my job. I quit Top Man at long last.
He quit his nasty retail job.
I did. Oh,
he's
it's
got a
horrible.
Proper job, making an actual salary now.
Damn it, I wish I represented Rich Energy so I could actually get a look at their books.
Yeah. Or their
Think about
product. And am I going to see you when I'm in the UK? Or are you going to be too busy?
I don't. Right. So Pip's invited me to the Silverstone thing. The only trouble is I'm woefully poor at the moment. I don't even know if I can afford a train ticket to Northampton. So probably not.
But I'm
unfortunately.
I'm around the evening of the 23rd in London. In London town.
Oh, you're kidding. That's my leaving drinks.
Yeah? All right then.
Darn it. Gosh darn it. Come to Sutton. Come to my leaving drinks.
Yeah, no. I got the whole family with me.
Yeah, bring them. That'll be fun.
Got the whole family with me.
There is no E-radio merch. We should get E-radio merch, shouldn't we?
We should. Yeah, what kind of merch would you actually spend money on?
T-shirt, something like that. A mug. A mug.
Oh.
People like mugs, coasters.
Oh, Chris, was that the sugar-free one, or was it the one that was full of sugar? And how could it taste worse than Red Bull, which I've only had one of ever, and it was like the most horrible experience of my life.
I was going to say, Fonseca's just said Rich Energy tastes awful, and I've heard a lot of people say it tastes exactly like Red Bull. Both of those statements are
True.
comparable.
Neither one is going to be useful without vodka in it, in my opinion.
Oh, Matt. So,
Stickers. Yes. Okay, we could potentially do stickers. We shall talk to Felix.
Stickers, fridge magnets.
Magnets. Yeah, we could do that.
Fridge magnets. That'd be good. Bumper stickers. Can we get the outro tagline on a bumper sticker?
Yeah, that would be good.
That would be awesome. You're not coming to the Sim event, are you, Matt?
Well, I was coming to the Sim event till the Sim event date changed.
Yeah,
because
then we
the
had
Sim
to
event
change it.
was going to
Really
be on the
unfortunate.
23rd because that was when the karting event was going to be, except for they had to change that date too.
Yeah, it's all gone a bit.
And so now there's no official event, even though I'm in the UK for an entire week. But, you know, we're hanging out in London on the 23rd, so if anybody wants to come say hi, I'll happily let people know where I am if you want to stop by
You know
and say
what?
hi.
If you're about during the day, I could definitely meet up during the day.
Yeah, I think so. I'll shoot you a WhatsApp, let you know where we are. But
Yeah, cool. I'll be annoyed about the Silverstone thing, but then also I'd feel, even if I went, I'd still feel like I was missing out because you guys are driving, aren't you?
yeah,
Yeah, I can't. So I would just be Pip's passenger. And as much as I'll take any opportunity to go and see Pip, because God knows I'm not going to be doing much of that now that I'm not doing 750 Motor Club events anymore.
right.
So yeah, it's nothing personal. It's nothing personal against Pip. I love the guy, but yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, no, it'll be good. But I'm looking forward. For those of you who don't know what we're talking about, the one thing that has worked out is that Pip Hammond has a 750cc stock hatch racer. Champion of what did he win? He won a championship. I don't think it was that.
He's a double stock hatch champion with
Right.
that car.
Yeah.
And he's bringing the Porsche as well, the 924, where he won the 924 championship a couple of years ago.
Yeah. He has invited both myself and Spanners to have I think you term it proper go around the full Silverstone Grand Prix circuit, the very same one that they race the Formula One races on. So
Yeah, it's,
we're gonna be
just
doing
track days around.
Yeah, I know. But how often was I really ever going to get the chance to drive around that circuit in anything that could be called a race car? Oh, that's right. That was never in the books for me until it just turned out it will happen. So that's
Yeah,
going to
no,
be a lot of
it's
fun.
awesome. It really makes me wish I had my license. Mind you, even if I had my license, chances are I probably wouldn't have had it long enough to be allowed out on a circuit. So
Yeah.
I have those opportunities.
I think we can all look forward to some fairly entertaining video from our outing. Is what I would have to say.
See that I'm half tempted to go in a purely media facility, just to film everything for you guys.
Yeah, well, you know.
But that's if depends on how much a train ticket to Northampton is and whether Spanners could pick me up at the station and drive me to Silverstone, because Silverstone just is in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, I know. Well, look, I'm coming from Bath, so don't talk to me about what things cost.
Oh yeah. Well, worse than that, mate. You're coming from New York.
Yeah, well, that cost has already been amortized, as they say.
So yeah, I'm half tempted to come just in that facility. You'll definitely catch me at the sim event, though. I'll try and see you.
Yeah, if it works out. I mean, we're in London for the whole week, so except for the Wednesday, we're down in Bath.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm sure the chat room is dying to hear of my personal plans for trotting about UK, but it's yeah, this will be my second visit because we went in the early 2000s. But it'll be the first time for the child to go, and that's going to be a lot of fun.
To Silverstone?
No, we didn't go to Silverstone, but to London, UK.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that'll be good.
Yeah, it'll be fun. All right, so are we done here? The chat room seems to have dribbled to a halt.
Yeah, we've just kind of been rambling, haven't we? Those of you who are still left in the chat room, thanks for joining us.
Yes, thank you very much. And it was very lively in the chat room today. I've noticed an uptick.
Your company is always welcome.
Yeah.
Always welcome. And hit up hashtag Formula-E on Slack. Please do.
All right, great. So I'm going to stop the stream now.